So you said wait for Dr. Mohammed, right?
Dr. Mohammed. Dr. Mohammed, you can make unmute. Dr. Mohammed, I asked you to unmute.
Sorry. Okay. First of all, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join us today. We'll share the secrets of strategies for including children with disabilities in early childhood settings or classrooms. We have the chat box to source your questions after the end of this great workshop. We'd like to express our deep thanks for Dr. Helen Mccabe. She is the president of the advisory board of our foundation, ECIF. She devoted her time and efforts for the sake of this foundation, really. She is an associate professor of special education and early childhood special education and early childhood special education, as we know. Also, she works at Demen College. She works as a consultant to many companies and organizations working in the field of autism, including communication and behavior intervention. She is very interested in early intervention. So, as you know, this field is very important for all children all over the world, especially here in the Middle East and the Arab countries, as we lack this branch, and we are in a bad need for this field. In fact, again, I'd like to thank Dr. Helen again, and I know that we gain many information, important information and knowledge about this field. Thank you, Dr. Helen, and you can start now.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Mohammed. Thank you, Dr. Esmat, for helping organize this. And thank you to everyone who is here. I know many of us in in ECEF are focused on early childhood education, thinking more about typically developing children or children who don't have disabilities. So I'm really happy that some of you may have an interest in including children with disabilities. So maybe if you are willing, you could put in the chat if you have any experience working with children with disabilities, or if you maybe have a family member who is a child with a disability. So if anyone has any experience that they want to share, like say, I'm a teacher, I have students with disabilities, or I have family with disability, please put that in the chat. We can all share and get to know each other. For me, I don't have a family member. I don't have a young child with a disability, but I have been teaching children with autism, starting with young children for many years, over 20 years. So today what I wanted to do is talk about first, just kind of raise awareness about why this topic is important. And so that's why I'm excited to talk to you all and just share how important this is for the children that we may come into contact with in our preschools. And then I want to talk about strategies. And it's very simple for today. I thought I would just focus on one strategy, which is the importance of partnerships and collaboration. And the second group of strategies is around using visual supports to help our students with disabilities, our young children with disabilities. So, So first of all, just in terms of awareness and understanding, when we think about early childhood education, you know, that's the field we're all in, but who are our students? And so I wanted to first think about parents. And parents, I would say, all want their children to have, all want their children to have early educational opportunities. So it doesn't matter if your child has a disability, doesn't have a disability. My guess is, you know, I think we can all assume that parents want their children to be in early education. And so how do we make sure that our preschools and our kindergartens, are they welcoming, are they inclusive of all children? And so just briefly, what does that mean? Because I know some of you are in general education, maybe you haven't had a lot of experience with children with disabilities. So from my experience, and my experience, as some of you know, is in the United States and in China, we might have children with what we call in the US developmental delay. And that means, often it means that the children don't have a diagnosed disability yet, but they're delayed. They're behind their peers in language, maybe physical development, communication, cognitive development. So you'll see delays, but in young children, sometimes we don't know what that disability is. But in our preschools, in our kindergartens, if we want to include all students, we may also have students with diagnosed disabilities as well, such as autism, intellectual disability, sometimes we call that cognitive disability, or maybe physical disability. So we'll have young children diagnosed with cerebral palsy, and then also sensory disabilities. So very young children may have hearing impairment, may be deaf, or vision impairment, may be blind. So when I'm talking about inclusive education and strategies for children with disabilities, I want us to be thinking about any range of abilities and challenges that children might have. These are the kids that may be in our classrooms. And I see that Catherine wrote, just because I was asking, do people have whether professional or personal experience with young children with disabilities? So Catherine says, advising parents concerned about their children's growth and development, right, and fearful that they may have a disability, which often involves autism. So exactly, even if you work in general education, even if you're just in a regular or a typical preschool, you may very well have students who are delayed and you're not quite sure why, but it could be after some testing that they may have a disability. So we're all going to be exposed to students with disabilities. So how then do we welcome and do we include all students? And in terms of sort of awareness and importance, I wanted to start with just sort of this idea of inclusion. That's what we say here, inclusion or inclusive education. The idea that, whether I'm in a preschool or a kindergarten class, children with a range of abilities and disabilities are all educated together in the same classroom. And let me just check really quickly. Right, and then Seema talks about when parents come to the preschool facing social and emotional challenges that children face. So these are all things that we may come in contact with. So in inclusive education, we're going to have children with a range of abilities and disabilities together. And there's a lot of research on benefits of inclusion for everybody. So the benefits aren't just for the kids with disabilities. The benefits are for, other people as well. One thing that we find is that there's definitely this important sense of belonging, that children with disabilities and their families too feel like, wow, I'm a part of this community. I'm a part of this classroom. So that's a really important thing for development, to have that sense of belonging. So rather than splitting the children up and not including them in the classroom, if we're all together, there can be an important sense of belonging. Another benefit that really affects everybody, including the typically developing peers, is learning about differences. So you'll have a child who doesn't have a disability in a preschool class with children with, say, cerebral palsy or autism. And then they say, oh, there's a lot of differences. Children are different. But when you do that from a young age, children are very accepting. So it's just, well, that's just my friend. Yeah, he can't walk, but he's my friend. And so learning about difference and accepting differences from a young age is a real benefit. Children with and without disabilities can work together. And then children without disabilities often learn, well, how do I help others? And then those with disabilities may benefit from having role models. So they learn from the others. So when typical peers, we say typically developing peers and peers with disabilities are together, there's really learning that goes both ways. And so a lot of times it's important when we're in special education, we say it's important to remember a child with a disability is just a child. And so if you're a teacher or an educator of young children, then we want to know that we're going to be including all children. Okay, I want to watch the time as well. Okay, so how do we do this? So the focus of my talk today is on strategies, and I tried to think of what would be sort of the most common strategies and the most doable. and effective for all children. And the most basic thing to remember is the importance of partnerships and collaboration. Because truly, if we want to include students with disabilities in our classrooms, we can't do it by ourselves. So that's why I was thinking about the teacher-student ratio. If I'm one teacher and I have 20 students in my kindergarten classroom, and 5 of them have a disability, honestly, I probably can't do that by myself. I'm going to need some support because we need to differentiate. We'll have students with different abilities, different needs. And so we need to make sure that it's not just, we don't just throw kids in a classroom and say, okay, Dr. Catherine, you teach all these 20 students. So we need collaboration. So a big piece in special education, we talk a lot about partnerships and collaborating between general education and special education, so that teachers who are trained to teach typically developing students, and then teachers who are trained to teach students with disabilities work together. And that might look different in different places. So if you are in a general education preschool, you're just in a regular preschool, maybe most of the teachers are general educators. But if you have a few students with disabilities, maybe you reach out and there's a special education teacher who comes and consults to your preschool. Maybe they collaborate by coming just once a week or twice a week, but they provide ideas, they provide resources, materials. Even better than that is something that looks more like co-teaching, where general educators and special educators are together in the same school and ideally the same classroom. So if we have a few students with disabilities and maybe 10 students or whatever without disabilities, it's really nice to have a general educator and a special educator working together, providing different types of expertise and being able to maybe break into groups and support students. I didn't put this on here, but I'm suddenly thinking whole group instruction is not the way to go when you have students with disabilities. In fact, it's probably not the most effective for any child. So when we can break into small groups and education is more active, then students will learn better. And so in addition to collaborating and partnering between 2 teachers, we might also have instructional support staff. So that's really important too. And this may seem, I don't know your backgrounds in special education and in inclusion, this may all seem very basic, but I think it's really important, especially when talking to general educators, to emphasize the importance of collaborating. And so we also need to collaborate with our support staff. And that might be, you might call it a teacher aide, a teacher assistant. Sometimes we say paraprofessional or shadow teacher, but these sort of teaching assistants are really important to help implement the strategies in the classroom. So if I have a student with autism, I can work with that student and my assistant can work with other students, or we can reverse, switch roles so that we're always being able to provide different support for students with different needs. Certainly collaboration also involves specialized services too. So working with speech therapists, occupational therapy, physical therapy, if those things are available in the preschool, and that is ideal. And many times, we try as much as possible to provide those services within a general education classroom. So those are some strategies to think about. Is we can't do it by ourselves. We need to reach out and have experts within other disciplines help us, like general and special ed together, like a support staff or like therapists. So regarding partnerships and collaboration, this is actually a strong area of interest of mine, is working with families, so collaborating with families. And it's important to note that this is definitely bi-directional. I think sometimes it's scary for general education teachers to say, oh, I can't have a child with, cerebral palsy in my classroom. I don't know anything about it. Or I don't know anything about autism. How could I teach this child? One of our most important resources is parents, because teachers have expertise, but parents have expertise too. So it's really important to focus on good communication and remembering that there needs to be mutual respect. Yes, parents respect teachers because we have, expertise, we've been trained, but we as professionals need to respect the families too and understand that their expertise is helpful to us. Parents are incredibly strong advocates and they're very informed. I did research a couple of years ago, so I couldn't help but including a couple of quotes from the parents that I researched a few years ago because they were so well informed and they really taught me about this bi-directional relationship between parents and teachers. And so they are doing so much to support the teachers. So again, we don't have to be like, oh, self. Remember that parents are there to help us and they have strategies to help us. So for example, one mother said, you know, I asked her about her relationship with the teacher and she said, I'm always trying to be proactive. Last year, I went over in the springtime to visit his classroom. And over the summer, I met with his teachers again. And I said, okay, this is what you can expect of him. And, you know, this is what he's going to need. That's what one mother said. So basically, she takes what she knows about her son and she brings it to the teachers. So if you're a teacher and you have a new student coming in with a disability, it's so important to talk to the parents and say, well, what works for him? What does he need? What supports does he need? And they'll tell you, so we can learn so much from families. And I have a couple other quotes from the families because they were just so informative. And it really is both ways. One of the parents said, you know, I'm so lucky. I'm really lucky because his teacher had a wealth of information. So certainly we want to provide support to families, but we also have to be recognize that they can provide support to us. So another one, sort of on the flip side, she said, we know it's not easy for the teacher. And so we, as in parents, so parents know it's not easy for the teacher. So one of the things we as parents tell the teachers is, you're not alone in educating my child. I'm part of it too. So if I can help make your job easier by being involved, and I can support you as a parent in understanding his behaviors or showing you how things work, then I will. And this parent also acknowledged, she said, or maybe you, the teacher, will show me something that works really well. So I love this because there's a lot of examples of where students are much more successful in their preschool classes, in their kindergarten classes, because the parent and the teacher worked together and learned from each other. And then whatever I'm doing at school, the parent can continue at home and vice versa. And that's very, very effective support for the children. So in addition to collaboration and partnerships, the second strategy that I wanted to talk about is visual supports. So, you know, it's funny. Over the years, I've worked with many educators, many experts, and I often, you know, early in my career, I would sort of ask, well, what should we do? What strategy should we talk about? And everybody talks about visual supports. And I finally realized, like, this is one of the most fundamental things that we can do to help support students with disabilities in our classrooms. And so the fact that everybody was talking about it over and over, I became very interested in it. And it truly is something that we should be aware of and how this helps students with disabilities. So first, I just want to say, you know, some people might think, oh gosh, that child with autism or that child with intellectual disabilities, there's no way they could keep up in my classroom. They couldn't catch up to the other students. But when we educate students, children with disabilities in inclusive settings, that doesn't mean keeping up on their own. We have to provide support, modify assignments, maybe accommodate, make changes. And so visual supports is one important way that we can just provide a little more support so they can be more successful. So what does this mean? What does visual support mean? I'm going to show you some examples. I'll have some visual examples of visual supports shortly, but I just want to highlight first, this is my awareness and advocacy piece, that it's so important for us to help young children with disabilities stay involved and stay engaged. And we can't do that if we just use traditional education methods that work for most of us. General education, whole group learning, that works pretty good for me as a student. But for our young children with disabilities, we need to have other ways to help them stay involved and engaged. And visual supports, which let me just show you so I make sure you know what I'm talking about very quickly. When I say visual supports, I'm talking about something like this to communicate. So this gives them a way to communicate, and I'll come back to this in a minute. This is a visual support, a communication support. And I'm also talking about schedules. Visual schedules is also a visual support to help students be successful in their day. So going back to why is this important? So these types of communication supports and schedule supports help them be more engaged with instruction, with teachers, and with their peers. Why? Because it helps them to understand more and simply participate more, because they can use, say, the communication support to communicate, which I will talk about. Visual supports also help students become more independent. Independence is because this. If I don't know what the schedule is, say for this training, then I'm going to be asking Dr. Azmat over and over again, Dr. Azmat, what's next? What do we do? When is this over? What happens after the training? Who's going to start the training? What do we do first? So I'm not independent. But if there's a visual schedule, for us, it might be a written agenda. Then I don't need to keep asking what's next, what's next. So a visual schedule helps children be more independent because they can just look and say, oh, first, sorry, I have to move your pictures. First, we have circle time, then we have centers, then we have snack, then we go outside. So if I'm in center time, I don't have to wonder, ooh, Dr. Seema, what's next? Professor Seema, what's next? What are we doing next? I can just look right here. Oh, after centers is snack time. So this promotes independence in young children. So coming back to this, the sort of reason that this helps, so it helps me independent. So what I'm talking about now is visual expressive communication supports. And that was the communication sheet. We call it a communication board, where students can say yes and no and what they want and what they need. And then we call it receptive or understanding support, such as schedules and also behavior reminders. So I want to talk briefly about why this is so important, because this is very, very, very important. I feel very strongly about this. So how do we promote meaningful learning and participation in preschools? For example, we want to provide students opportunities to make choices, to respond to questions. So active participation in a preschool classroom activity is often, hey, everybody, what's the weather outside? What color do you want to use? Which song should we sing next, right? There's lots of back and forth. But some children, say with developmental disabilities or hearing impairment, they can't communicate. They can't speak. So they're not going to be able to respond to those questions. So what do we do? That's why visual strategies for communication, which I'm going to talk about first, for expressive communication is so important. So here's the thing. In a classroom setting, if we ask questions, but some of our students can't speak, does that make any sense? So if you ask questions to the whole group, okay, everyone, who wants to tell me what day is it today? And you have a student who can't answer that question verbally using speech. Honestly, I just don't think that's very fair. And it's not providing support to the student to respond. They might know the answer. Today is Friday, but they don't speak, whether that's because they have a hearing impairment, cerebral palsy, autism. They don't have the ability to speak orally. Or maybe even worse is asking questions to a child who can't speak. You know they can't speak, and you don't provide them with the support. And so you say, Johnny, is it sunny today or is it windy today? Is it sunny or is it cloudy? But if you don't provide a visual support, they can't answer the question. This is very frustrating to a child, and it's not conducive to active participation and engagement. And this is very simple strategy, having some visuals so that our children, regardless of their speaking abilities, can participate and can respond. So I'm going to show you I'm going to talk about this. So one strategy is what I just showed, and I'll show again. It's called communication board. So any kind of visual pictures where you say, is it sunny or windy? And a child could just point to the picture of windy. But if we don't have anything in front of us, we just use our mouths and we don't have any pictures, tell me, is it sunny or is it windy? And we have two different pictures, then they can't communicate. So this way, with visual communication supports, all children can answer questions and participate. So for example, here's a communication board, an example of a communication board. So we can say, you know, what do you want to do? Do you want more? What do you need? They can point, I need help. They can tell a teacher, come here, or say, look at this, look, I finished. You know, like if you have a child and they finished their artwork and they're so excited and they want you to look at it, but they only know how to make a noise because they don't have verbal speaking ability. You know, they make a noise, you're not sure what they want. They can say, look, I finished. They can even say, look, I'm finished. So having that visual communication board is really important. So children without speech can also participate. And this one just added a few more pictures, maybe specifically related to the play area that they're working in. Or you say, okay, everybody choose, what do you want to do today? What do you want to do in this activity? And someone says, I want to play with the cars. I want to play with the dolls. And then you go to the child with the disability, with the communication disability, and they can point to the Play-Doh. They can point to the puzzles, and you know what they want to do. They have communicated. So this is a really valuable strategy. And I'll be honest with you, not just for young children, for older students too, who have disabilities, who don't have effective spoken communication skills. This is an excellent strategy to help them be more successful in the classroom. And honestly, it reduces frustration and therefore it reduces behavior challenges too. So in my field, a lot of people are very interested in and concerned with behavior challenges. So if we can allow children, give them a way to communicate, even if they don't speak, then that's less frustrating. So behavior challenges will reduce. So that was sort of expressive communication. And now I want to talk just a little bit about visual, sorry, I'm moving your pictures around, visual supports for understanding, engagement, and independence. So using visual supports for understanding. The focus here, the communication board was on expressive communication. Visual schedules is more about receptive communication or understanding, because visual schedules tell a student what's done and what's next. This directly addresses communication and behavioral challenges of children with disabilities, whether it's autism spectrum disorders, whether it's you know, cerebral palsy, intellectual disabilities. And honestly, it probably helps typically developing children too. If you bring a child into a classroom and they have no idea how long they're going to be there, well, is it all day? Is it a half a day? What am I doing here? What do I do first? What do I do next? That can cause all kinds of anxiety among, you know, children with a range of abilities and disabilities. Maybe this links to Seema's comment about social and emotional challenges. So we want children to feel secure and to know what's happening. So when we use schedules, a children's understanding of what's going on increases. And so then they're calmer, they know how to predict what's happening. And this is very effective in reducing behavior challenges. So this is just an example. I showed this earlier, but so say this is a daily schedule. Okay, when you come to preschool, maybe it's a half day, it's a 2-hour preschool. First we have circle time, then we have centers, then we have snack time, yay, snack time, then we get to go outside, and then we go home. So a child, whether they love preschool or don't love preschool, this is going to be helpful to let them know how much time is left, what else are we doing? And it's always good to have fun things mixed in. So snack is fun. So maybe someone feels like center time is kind of like work time. That's a lot of work. I don't really want to do my center work, but it's okay because right after is snack time. But if we don't have a visual support, just because I say to them, just do your work and then we'll have snack. Sometimes that's hard for students to understand because of communication disabilities. So my saying it is not nearly as helpful as having a visual picture. And then they know, oh, I get it. I just got to persist for a little longer and then we'll have snack time. Another example of a schedule, before I put up the other example. So basically, when you think about visual supports for understanding and independence, again, we all use schedules in our daily lives. And I don't know about you all, I have my calendar here, which I write everything on. So that's a visual support. If I did not have this visual support, I wouldn't know what I was doing today. And honestly, I would be anxious. Am I going to miss a meeting? Oh my goodness, I said I would do a presentation for ECAF, but I forgot. So I have to write it down. So when we provide visual schedules for children with disabilities, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing weird about that. I think some people think it's artificial. It's like a fake support and it's too much. But we say we all use visual schedules in our day, or many of us use. We write notes to ourselves, write lists, do this, do this, do this, to-do lists. And so for children with disabilities, young children, maybe it's for a whole day, maybe it's a schedule for a special activity, maybe it's a schedule for part of the day. So the length depends on the ability, the understanding ability of children. So some of them maybe can only handle 2 steps or 4 steps, but it will help promote understanding and therefore engagement. And you can also have visual supports, say, within a center, so more like tasks. It's center time. First, I'm going to do fine motor, then I'm going to do something else, then I have an example of it. Let me show you the example. So this is, let's say, the whole day or the half day. But then within a center, maybe it's the block and shape center. So first, I'm going to get my toys out. I'm going to play with the bristly blocks first. Then I'll play with the square blocks. Then I'll put them in the shape sorter. And then it's time to clean up and I'm finished. And so within a center or within an activity, we can have a list of tasks that they're doing. This is helpful too to provide independence, because if you have young children in an inclusive preschool classroom and some have disabilities, they might get to the block center. They're not quite sure what to do there. They might throw the blocks, they might tap the blocks, but they're not really sure, well, what do I play with? What do I do? So having visual supports within the center can help them to know, oh, I could do this first and I could put them in the shape sorter. It just gives a little more guidance. Visuals also help students transition from one center to the next. So down here, instead of finished, we could have a picture of the next center. Like I'm in the toy and fine motor center, and down here we could have a picture of the sand table center or the pretend play center. Oh, okay, this is done now, and next I'm going to pretend play. So this is a very, very important, well-researched strategy, visual supports, visual schedules, communication, visual communication, but it's also not that complicated. So it's something that we could adopt in our classrooms in a day or two. Just get some pictures together and start providing this kind of support to students. Now, these pictures were printed out from a software, a special education software. You could do that, but you certainly could draw the pictures yourself, or you could download them from online. And again, I don't know your background, and so you might already be doing this, and this is very basic for you, in which case I apologize, but I'm just not sure, given that I think most of you have a general education background, I'm not sure how familiar this is. Okay, so yeah, visual schedules, as I said, provide clarity and predictability. So we know what's happening next. So there's no uncertainty. What am I doing next? Oh my God, what if it's something I don't like? When is lunch? When is snack time? That's all in the schedule. We want to be consistent in our schedule, but we also want to help children prepare for change, because many people ask, well, wait a minute, if you have a set schedule, especially for kids with autism, aren't they going to become inflexible and not willing to have a change? So we need to make sure that our schedules, they do change. We rely on a schedule, we have the visual support, but it's not necessarily the same every day. Or if you're in school and pretty much the classes are the same every day, there's ways to highlight, oh, look, there's a change coming. So I want to share this example. I was in this amazing special education classroom here in New York. The kids were a little older, maybe 6 or 7 years old. And the teacher used this lightning bolt, this picture of a lightning bolt when there was change, and it was fabulous. So what happened was, say it was raining, and so they couldn't go outside. So she would put a picture of the lightning bolt over the outside. So this originally said outside. So as soon as the kids got there in the morning, they saw, okay, it's a regular day. I've got circle time, I have centers, I have snacks. oh, wait a minute, we can't go outside because it's raining. So she used a visual support to represent change. And this, they handled it very, very well because it was consistent. And they knew it's okay. I still have my schedule, but yeah, there's a little change on here. So if anybody is interested in this topic, please do see me, because I'm happy to talk more about it and how to design it and the meanings behind it. But this idea of using a schedule for consistency, but also to promote change is really important. Okay. So overall, I'm about ready to wrap up here. I just want to kind of summarize, the strategies that I wanted to share with you today. Very basic, but very manageable. I think even in a general education setting is how to use collaboration and how to use visual support. So I hope that you'll think about, how do we work with our colleagues? How do we really make use of family expertise? And one thing I didn't talk about, though, is collaborating with peers. So having children with and without disabilities help each other. I talked about that regarding sort of the benefits of inclusion, but it really is a strategy. So systematically saying, well, who is stronger in this? Who might be helpful? But also seeing where our children with disabilities, where their strengths are, because they might be helpful, say, in art or in music. So how can we get peers to mutually help each other and have students work in groups? That's another important strategy. And then we talked about visual supports for communication and for scheduling. My argument is our goal is to include all students in an early childhood environment, but not just dump them in there. We need to provide support for students' diverse learning needs. And so I'd love for us all, you don't have to answer this question, but just think, what would you want for your child? If you had a child with a disability, or if your sister or your cousin had a child with a disability, what would you want for them? Because parents do want opportunities for education, just like any other child. And so it's important to know that our children can all learn together. So these really were just some very simple strategies to get us started. And I thank you very much. That's all I have. I don't know if anybody has questions or comments, but thank you very much for attending. Oh. I'm just going to put up the first slide in case you want my email or anything like that. Whoops, sorry. There you go. There's my email address. So I don't know if anybody has any questions, but if not, I really thank you for coming.
Many thanks, Dr. Helen. Many thanks, Dr. Helen, for joining us today. Really, it was very informative session. Thank you for sharing your experience in special education field, especially about many modern strategies for including children with disabilities in classroom and also out classroom. I surely that this workshop will help many teachers and parents as well to make appropriate instructional decisions about how to best teach children the principles and the philosophy and also strategy with their children from birth to 8. As you know, many young children with disabilities in all the preschool classroom are in dire need of special strategies and diverse activities to integrate them with their peers so that you can easily coordinate and help them also with the lesson plan. We can also sum up some points that we have accepted and acquired from you today. For example, in classroom, we help our disabilities children by some activities for young children with disabilities and provide many opportunities with the questions and hear their answers. Also by visual supports for communications and participation. Provide visual schedules including receptive language, which is very valuable and helpful in facing behavior and challenge as well to express their needs. And also point about visual supports with the in center by using blocks and shapes. It's very important. It's very important to help them in transition from center to the next. Very important session today with you, Dr. Helen. We thank you again. And now, if anyone
I see some questions in the chat. Someone says, can you unmute us?
Okay.
I think it's Dr. Mohammed and Catherine.
Yes, now. Yes, now anyone can unmute himself.
Okay, this Doctor, thank you first of all, Dr. Helen, for this great awesome information. But this might not. I have an inquiry about here. I think that some people think that there should be a different teacher in the classroom with the main teacher. She is specialized in the autism, for example. But as I know, and you can correct me if my thinking is wrong, is that the main teacher teach for all children, normal and abnormal one, and a special one is specialized teacher, or the one who is specialized in early childhood special needs, prepare a plan for the main teacher, and the main teacher applied this plan. This is my first inquiry. The second one, our second question, what will happen if we have many different disabilities in the classroom? For example, the visual schedule or visual aids is very important for all children, if even they are normal or abnormal, as you know, to prevent challenges and behavioral problems. But what happens if we have hearing disabilities and blindness disabilities? We should focus. For example, we're hearing for some materials. If you have many different disabilities in the classroom, what will be the solution?
Yep. Okay, so these are good questions. So first, there are different models in early childhood and early intervention in terms of collaboration. So sometimes, yes, it is more like a consultant. So the special education teacher maybe comes once a week or a couple times a week and provides guidance to the you said main teacher, I'll call it the general education teacher. So sometimes it's more of a consulting situation. And then sometimes, though, ideally they're at least in the same building, and the special education teacher works directly in the classroom with the children with disabilities together. So, but I agree with you that the general education teacher, the what you call the main teacher, the general education teacher, she or he should see all children as their responsibility. But sometimes, but ideally, the special educator can be there more than just providing some guidance. It really depends on a lot of things.
Sorry, she will help her or give her guidance, but she didn't interfere with the teaching practice itself. As I think that the teacher, that the child feels that he is different from other children.
Oh.
He or he abnormal one. Why is this one come with me and stay with me? The other children with the junior teacher. So do you know this?
This is, yes, such a good question. That's such a good, it's a huge issue. And so what we do is the special education teacher should be also working with all children. So the other kids, they don't need to know, oh, that lady, she's here for Helen only, right? So maybe the special ed teacher comes in, maybe they break into two groups, so nobody knows why she's there. Young children don't even know that's a special ed teacher. But the issue, there's a big issue that you're bringing up, which is with teachers' assistants. So not special ed teachers, but the assistants or the aides that are, sometimes they're assigned one-on-one. So individually, my role is to help Helen. And that is a problem. And so there's research and there's efforts to, we say, back up. So to help the kids be more independent. And because you're absolutely right, other children will say, well, Helen always has Mrs. Smith with her, so I'm not going to talk to Helen. So yeah, absolutely. But they still need to be in the classroom, but the goal is to kind of make it that they're working with everyone.
Yeah, with everyone.
And your second question, many disabilities, you're right. I tried to sort of include, I think the strategies that I talked about today are helpful for students with hearing impairment that you mentioned, but certainly blind visual impairment, you know, the visual supports are not going to help. However, sometimes these visual schedules are tactile, like it's like a thing. Like first we're going to make a phone call, then we're going to have juice, and so you actually have an item on the thing. But you're right, it's very specialized, and there are specialists who specialize in those disabilities.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Anna.
Thank you. I think Catherine had a question and Seema has her hand up, so I don't know who wants to go or anybody else.
Hi Helen, how are you? That was brilliant. Much. Just put my camera on. Yeah, I was really you obviously speak with an awful lot of passion and everything, and this is you know, of huge importance to you, and the work that you do, really bringing those visual aids into the lives of children, I can see it really benefits them. So my question really was around how much of that then goes back into the home, and how well you work with parents to help them to see the benefit and ease that they can bring to their child, and you know, how you work together really.
Right. So first I'll start by saying most of my work is in China. It's not in the United States. So when I'm describing it, it's not necessarily here, but we absolutely say to the families, you must take this home, especially the communication boards, because we say that's your voice, that's the child's voice. So it's not, and in China, we talk about this a lot because sometimes there's a misunderstanding, like this communication board is used during communication class. And we say, it's not a class, it's his voice or it's her voice. And so you want to take this home and use it at home. And well, I'll give examples from the US. In the US, same thing. A lot of times the communication boards now are digital, like on an iPad. So there's software. And so the iPad belongs to the child and it goes from home to school and school to home. I think families are very willing to use it. Sometimes the challenge is the child doesn't want to use it because the child wants to use their voice, their real voice. And so sometimes we say, just use this for the words that we can't understand. Like if you can say train, great, I can understand you. But if you're saying, I want spaghetti for dinner, I can't understand you. So let's use this communication device as well. So absolutely it is a process. And then like in China for the schedules, some families just take it and run, and they have lots of schedules at home and task, you know, for toothbrushing, step 1, step 2, step 3, and others think of it more as a school-based thing. But you're right that it's very important that it's going to be most effective if we have it in both places.
Yeah, absolutely. That consistency for the child as well, you know, so beneficial. Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. No, really...
Thank you.
Thanks, Helen.
Thank you.
Hi,
Seema, is
Helen.
your hand up? Yeah, hi.
Yes, thank you very much. It was a wonderful, wonderful presentation, and I really enjoyed it. I hope I did not miss much, but and I really agree with you. The collaboration and being in the inclusive classroom is the best for the children. I would add here that when I was in Italy, that's what they used. Both the special ed teacher and the regular teacher were together, working together in collaboration. They used to make the plans together, observing the children, taking the anecdotes, and then making a plan. So that was wonderful.
That's
And I really agree what you were saying. The visual communication, I use it and it is so effective. Only the thing that I would ask for your expertise is that we do certain things, but being in intervention and inclusion, but just explain more with your expertise when a child with some ability, like a autistic child with a high spectrum autism, they throw a tantrum, a big tantrum, and it happens in the class. Though the teachers are there, and special ed teacher will always talk with all the children together instead of just giving a feeling to the regular children that this is a special child and you are regular child. No distinction. There shouldn't be any distinction. That's what we do, and that's what I learned. But when they throw a tantrum, the special teacher has to use certain strategies that you know best, and that's how they keep the room perfect. So please add that. I would ask you to.
So this is one of my favorite topics, but it also would take 3 hours.
I know.
to fully answer your question. But what I will say is one of the benefits of visual schedules is that it provides predictability. Children with autism feel anxious if they don't know what's happening next. So right now I'm not talking about responding to a tantrum, I'm talking about preventing a tantrum, right? So if we have a schedule, if we know that they get upset because they don't know what's happening, we can use the schedule to prevent the behavior. The other thing is, so again, this is very tiny answer to something that I could talk about for 3 hours minimum. But the other thing is, children with autism, sometimes because they're upset, they're not hearing what you're saying. Their receptive skills goes down because they're upset. So one example that I have is we were working with at a program for children with autism, and it was time for lunch. Well, lunch is a good thing. This child liked lunch, but he was playing with a puzzle. So he started to have a tantrum. He started because his mother was saying, it's time for lunch, clean up, it's time for lunch. Put the puzzle away, it's time for lunch. But he didn't understand it. He just was like, I'm doing this puzzle. And so one of the teachers walked over him with a picture of lunch and just said, lunch. And he went, oh, and he started cleaning up his puzzle and went to lunch. So sometimes it's just understanding, well, not sometimes, always it's understanding, why are they having that tantrum? What is it that set them off? And that is something that we don't have enough time to talk about today, but I will just say, as much as possible, providing that visual can help them understand and go, oh, you're not asking me to do something bad. You just want me to go to lunch. Okay. It's a great question. And if anybody is interested, I would be happy to do a full talk on this question of behavior.
Thank you so much. Yes,
sure.
I agree 100%. Communication is the key.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Understanding and expressing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. And good seeing you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Azmat.
Many thanks, Dr. Helen, for joining us today. If anyone want to ask Dr. Helen before the end. Yes.
And if you have questions that come up later, feel free to text me or email me.
Yes, that's all.
Okay.
Many thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Muhammad.
Bye.
Thank you, Dr. Sima, Dr. Catherine, Dr. Nihad.
Thank you, Ismail. Thank you, Muhammad.
Thank
you,
you,
Helen. Bye.
Bye.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.